Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar for cybersecurity peace of mind. Before we get started, here's some information about Neoscope and our presenter, Craig Taylor. Neoscope is an end-to-end solution provider, an award-winning enterprise IT-focused security company. We're recognized in 2016 by Inc. 5000 and NHBR as the 8th fastest growing company in New Hampshire. We offer managed IT and security services, professional services, consulting, and procurement. We support clients in almost every vertical market, from e-commerce, healthcare, manufacturing, legal, biotech, and many others. Craig Taylor, Neoscope CISO, is a 25-year veteran of cybersecurity. He's worked for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Computer Sciences Corporation, Vistaprint, and Chase Payment Tech. Now is the Chief Information Security Officer for Neoscope and a virtual CISO for many of our managed IT clients. He holds a CISSP, security certification. He's an accomplished public speaker and spends his days helping clients prepare for cyber war in the 21st century. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you and welcome to the 10 Steps to Cybersecurity Peace of Mind. Today we're going to talk about what is cybercrime, who's attacking us and why, cybersecurity trends, the 10 things businesses must do to prepare themselves from attacks, including a risk assessment, policy governance, training their people, technology protections that they need to put in place when their employees forget their governance and their training and click a link or visit a malicious website. We'll talk a little bit about cyber liability insurance as a cost of doing business now, similar to car insurance for an individual or fire insurance, flood insurance. It's now the cost of doing business, protecting you when a particularly egregious cyber event occurs in your business. And we'll go briefly over the Neoscope Shield services at the conclusion and how they prepare businesses for these 10 areas of focus in protecting themselves from a cybersecurity event. So with that, we'll get started. At the end, I will tell you that we'll open it up to questions if folks on the call have questions. You can type them in your window and Charlie will collect those and ask them of me. So what is cybercrime specifically? It's very simply put, any criminal activity involving a computer and a network. The computer can be used to conduct the crime, or it's the target of the crime and the data that that computer holds. Let's talk about some cyber malware examples that we're seeing in our support of businesses in the area of cybersecurity today. The first bit of malware that we see is ransomware. Now, we've seen a lot of ransomware growth in the last 2 to 3 years. We'll get into the reasons why, but this specific bit of malware is where hackers hold all your files ransom or hostage by encrypting them and preventing you from access to them until you pay a Bitcoin, which is anywhere from $300 to $500, $700 to get the key to unlock those files. And some businesses that we've seen and come in to restore files from have been absolutely 100% down because of all the encryption of their business files. Recovering from that, from backups, is probably the easiest strategy. We don't recommend paying the ransom, unlike the FBI's advice. The second bit of malware that we see in these environments is the same bit of software that Neoscope uses to manage your computers as a managed IT client of ours, a remote access support tool, or a RAT. And hackers use this very same software to spy on your network, looking at your data, finding the PCI data, the HIPAA data, the intellectual property to steal out of your environment. One of the third bits of malware that we commonly see in our client environments is called bot network software. And this is where you may have heard of botnets on the internet, where hackers have collected thousands, tens of thousands, and in a few cases, millions of computers and devices to do their bidding. There are dark websites where you can rent a bot network to do a denial of service attack on competitors or gambling websites, any manner of business, and you can extort money from them to stop the attack, to restore their services to their clients. To a gambling website, being down for an hour can cost you $50,000, $100,000, who knows how much. And so the hackers will take you offline and ransom you to get that ransom payment before they restore your service. We do see botnets periodically in some of the client environments, typically on laptops picked up on Wi-Fi networks and things like that. The fourth area of malware that we're seeing, not commonly, this is just the cusp of it, is malware on smartphones and devices, mobile devices. If you only download software from the App Store today or Google's Play Store if you're an Android user, you're probably safe. We haven't seen any viruses in the legitimate software from those two closed loop systems where Apple and Google scan the applications that are in their stores for malware and you download there. Where we do see malware on mobile devices is on phones that have been rooted or jailbroken, which is how individuals can sometimes break into the core operating system of their phone, enabling them to download software from third-party places. And it's those third-party applications which have begun to come with viruses. The most recent was something called Gooligan, and it's downloaded and stole your Google credentials to your email. There are, of course, other crimes and bits of malware on the internet, but these are the main three that we're seeing most of the time, and then the emerging threat of the mobile device malware. So moving on, let's talk about who's attacking us and why. There are four main groups attacking people today. There are other groups, obviously, but these are the four main groups. The first of which is script kiddies. Script kiddies are hacking for fun and notoriety. They are not trying to be harmful. They're not trying to extort money. They are simply breaking into systems to see what they can find and gaining street cred. An example of this was years ago. I knew a hacker friend who had broken into NASA and had the space shuttle plans, and he was very proud of these plans that he had. But he did no harm, allegedly. He was not out for money. The largest growth area of attackers that we see at Neoscope is within the organized crime arena. These are organized hacking teams that have realized it's far easier to extort money online than it is in the real world. If you consider the polar opposites of how difficult it might be today to rob a bank and get away with it versus jump through a series of computers in different countries of the world before attacking a U.S. business, encrypting their software, and extorting an anonymous Bitcoin from them. The chances of getting caught in the latter are very, very low. The FBI does not get involved in these attacks unless the total dollar value is over, I think it may be more than 500,000 today. So you can imagine how many SMBs or mid-sized companies are attacked and extorted, and if they don't have good backups and all their files are being held ransom, they have to pay the ransom to get their files back and get business started again. This is one of the largest growth areas we're seeing in terms of attackers on the internet today. The third type of organization or hacker group is nation states. Thomas Friedman wrote a book in the 80s or 90s about the world is flat, and he was talking about international trade and labor forces, competing with everyone else in the world on a flat, playing field. Well, that may be true physically of the world, but on the internet is even flatter and far, far darker, allowing every nation state, every country of the world to focus their cyber attacks for international global advantage. And here's an example picture of a bunch of hackers maybe in China or North Korea or some other place. But rest assured that every country of the world, France, the US, Canada, Brazil, Israeli, they all have their offensive and defensive capabilities hacking for global advantage. I have a particular photograph to show you here which will drill this home. This is something, a news article I saw today, how a Chinese automaker can clone Porsche and still get away with it. Now, did they clone it with the electronic files by breaking into Porsche and then being able to reproduce it? Or did they buy a Porsche, deconstruct it, and remanufacture all the components? I think it's probably the former. It's a pretty complex vehicle to reproduce, but now these are selling for 1/5 the cost in China as a modern day Porsche. It's a good example of intellectual property theft potentially. The fourth group that you may have read a lot about this recently, are hacktivists, hacking for political advantage. And this could be hackers that break into the DNC to embarrass the Hillary Clinton campaign, but it could also be considered anonymous, who make it their business to hack companies who they think are doing harm to the world. I've seen hacking groups, think of it as the modern day equivalent of Greenpeace, where they were ramming whaling ships because they disagreed with the philosophy of harvesting whales from the ocean. Hacking groups today hack into ExxonMobil to see if they're hiding things about global warming, or whoever. They're hacking for a political motivation and to cause embarrassment and change societal viewpoints on a particular topic. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're in their sites, you may be attacked. Why cybercrime matters so much? This slide is really sobering to those in the small to medium-sized business marketplace. Symantec, on the left side of this slide, has done a study over the last 5 years showing that in 2011, SMBs were the source of about 18% of all cyber breaches. That has grown steadily over the years until last year it was 63% of cyber attacks and breaches against businesses were in the SMB space or size. And what is that size? If you look at the graphic on the right from Verizon, Verizon collects all of the breach data that's available throughout the world, from the Australian CERC through Interpol to the US FBI, NSA, and they put it into a database and they run a multi-relational analysis of it, and they tease out certain facts. One of those is this: if you're an organization or a business or a nonprofit with 11 to 100 employees, you're 15 times more likely to be attacked than if you have less than 11 or more than 100 employees. Think about that for a moment. That's a very sobering statistic. Now, the question that obviously pops into my mind, and probably yours, is why is that? What is driving this SMB attack trend? And it's really quite simple. There are a number of very specific reasons why they're targeting these SMBs, and the first of which is time. Most SMBs, if I've spoken to many owners and senior leadership and even employees at SMBs, and they have a lack of time to spend on most things. They're wearing multiple hats, they're running different parts of the business, and they have very little time to spend on cybersecurity. And so it doesn't get done, it doesn't get addressed. The second reason is money. SMBs just don't have the money to spend on elaborate technologies to protect their business. While I was working at Chase Payment Tech, the question wasn't what it costs, it was how do we get risk to zero. Banks are built on reputation, and a cyber breach for a bank really can harm their reputation, so they are willing to spend whatever it took to protect themselves from breach. SMBs just don't have those deep pockets to spend on all of that. The third reason is that our employees at SMBs, nonprofits, you name it, are not well versed or aware of security issues. My children are 17 and 14. My daughter's 17, my son is 14. They know about sexting and not to do it. They know about cyberbullying, what it is, how to avoid it, why not to do it. But they know nothing about password managers, phishing emails, social engineering attacks. They know none, and they are not receiving training or even an hour, let alone a minute of this outside of my personal home where I talk to them about it. And our workforce is just not aware of these issues. So they are all novices when it comes to cybersecurity. And not only that, but we don't spend the time training our workforce, knowing that they don't have this knowledge. We're still not spending the time in the SMB arena to do security awareness education and training on policies, on attack methodologies, on how to avoid them. The fact that the folks on this call are here today is addressing this specific issue. We are beginning to build an awareness in the workplace, a recognition that training and education are critical to avoiding these attacks. One of the last reasons for SMBs to be squarely in hackers' attack scope is that they don't have security on staff. It's commonly and widely known that cybersecurity professionals are very in demand and hard to find. That makes them very expensive. Small to medium-sized businesses don't have the budget to spend to hire a cybersecurity professional. So for all these reasons here, and one more, small to medium-sized businesses are squarely in the hacker's attack scope. The final reason is that some small businesses, I wouldn't necessarily say many, but some small businesses are a backdoor into much larger targets. I use that word on purpose. If you think back to the Target breach of 2014, it was the small HVAC vendor that had remote access into all of Target's buildings to manage the environmental controls that was itself compromised, and the hackers went from that HVAC vendor directly into Target's environment and into their point of sale devices and stole literally millions of credit cards from you and I as we went about our business at Target. So sometimes an SMB can be targeted not for what they have, but who they have access to. That's what's driving this SMB attack trend. And the impact of a breach can be significant. If you believe the National Cybersecurity Alliance, it says that in its studies, 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of a data breach. Now, I think that's a little bit of hyperbole. It would have to be a major security breach at a customer for them to be remotely likely to go out of business. But if you can think of many scenarios where this would be the case. If you're an accounting firm or a financial advisor firm or a tax preparation firm, and you have a public disclosure that you've lost your client's data to a security breach, are you going to win new business? Are people going to take their business elsewhere? How much of that could you survive and stay in business? It might be difficult. But even if it's only 30% or 25% of businesses that go through a major breach, that's still far, far too high. And it's a risk that we can't afford to take in our businesses. So let's now talk about the 10 protections every business needs to consider and implement to protect themselves from these attacks that we all know are going on daily. When you look at a cybersecurity program, it has 3 main pillars resting on a risk management framework underpinning the entire program. The 3 pillars are policies and governance of your employees, and that's a cyber program, but it includes HR policies and things like that. All of those can be under this policy where you govern your employees, you guide them with how they're expected to behave. But then the second pillar has to do with the people who are reading these policies, the people have to be trained on those policies to understand what their responsibilities are relating to policies, but also you need to train them on how to spot the attacks, the phishing emails, the social engineering attempts, the physical security breaches that can occur at your business so that they can stop them before they become a problem. And then finally, the third pillar of a good information security program is the technology that underpins the people and the policies so that when they forget their governance and when they forget their training and they click a phishing email link, the technology can back you up and prevent that infection, prevent that compromise or that remote access Trojan from taking advantage of your business. And of course, it rests on a risk management framework of assessments so you know what your risks are. Let's go into those specifically in detail now. As we see here, we've just talked about these areas of protection. We're going to go into each section that you see here in brief over the course of the next set of slides. So Sun Tzu wrote a book a couple thousand years ago about the art of war, in which he wrote, "Every battle is won before it is fought." And what that means to me as a cybersecurity professional is that businesses need to conduct a risk assessment of their data to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, what the risks and vulnerabilities are against their business. How is the risk assessment done? You have to go in and look at the data that you as a business owner have at your company. How does that data operate at rest? Where does it move? How do you take it in from your clients? Does it leave your organization in emails? Is it protected during that movement in your organization? You also look at the threats and vulnerabilities to your business. Threats being actors, people that are doing something to break into your company, steal your data, harm you, exploit you. Vulnerabilities can be thought of as the things hackers take advantage of: a missing patch, a poorly configured firewall, default passwords. All of those are vulnerabilities in your environment that threat actors can take advantage of to compromise your business. Then any good risk assessment will look at each of these risks and say, how likely is that to happen? Finally, what would the impact be of a particular risk if it were to happen? What all of this boils down to then at the end of the day is a cybersecurity risk registry that lists all of the risks to your business and categorizes them appropriately so you know how and where to spend your finite money, dollars, and time addressing the most critical risks that are most likely and most severe to your business. And that then becomes your roadmap for your business for the next 2 to 3 years until you perhaps identify new risks that come on or mitigate old risks and remove them from the registry. At least you will know that you're spending your finite resources in the right places. The second thing that we talked about was a governance program, providing your employees with the rules of the road. In my experience, employees want to do the right thing. They just need to be told what it is, and they'll comply most of the time. So when you look at a policy or governance program, you need to have these components in your program in order for it to be successful. Today, it needs to be 100% automated and online. Paper tracking of signatures is so difficult and so time-consuming that it's never done right, especially when you have a workforce that's remote in different states. Policies should be updated, so how do you get the new ones signed? It needs to be fully online, fully automated. It needs to have robust tracking and reporting mechanisms, not just so that you can ensure you get to 100%, but so you can prove it to an auditor. Policies often are set on shelves and collect dust and never get read again once they're given once. I've seen handbooks with a layer of dust on a shelf at many companies I walk into. Policies need to be living and breathing documents. They need to be updated and approved annually and resent to their employees so that they understand the changes in that policy over the course of the previous year. The solution that we have at Neoscope accomplishes all these things and more. It reduces the labor costs of a policy and governance program by a factor of 10. If it takes your HR person 100 hours a year to roll out their paper-based HR policies, we can add cybersecurity policies to that, automate everything, including the HR policies, through the online web portal, and take 10 hours to do it with your HR staff. It automates and eliminates paper tracking and filing. There's no more need for filing cabinets full of people's signatures, and are they all there? Who's left? Who's new? Did we give everybody the right paperwork? Did they sign it? The nice part about this solution is it also automates reminders to non-compliant employees. The HR person doesn't have to go searching for who did sign, who didn't sign. It's all tracked electronically, and those that are non-compliant get reminders so that they have to go and e-sign their policy or take some training video. You can question the knowledge on an employee. Quite often we hand out policies and they never get read. Employees say, yeah, I read it and signed, but they never really digest what's in the policy. If you add a questionnaire to these things, which we can do, you can test that they've read it and understand it. Finally, it reminds the administrators of the program, the HR person or someone who's designated for cybersecurity, that a policy is coming up for renewal and it needs to be recertified by the policy owner to say, have there been changes? We had a WISP, or a written information security policy at Neoscope, that we recently updated to have comments about social media posts and who is authorized and who is not authorized to make comments on social media about our company. We wanted to have a tighter control on that. So we added it to the WISP. We put it into the header of the document that said, this is what's changed this year, and we reissued it to our employees. That's all possible in an automated tool that we include at Neoscope. Here's an example of the policies. You can see we even have an intern policy when we have interns that they must sign. And you can see who's compliant at a glance with green check marks. The blue is for those that are in their period of acceptance. A red X would indicate someone is non-compliant. And here, for auditor's perspective, we can show an auditor in a single image our compliance at Neoscope to all of our policies, all of our training videos in one fell swoop. It's pretty robust, and auditors, they love this screen, and it saves us a lot of dings when we're in the middle of an audit. So now we move on to training your people. We don't have to just train them on the policies and test them on the policies. We have to train them on the common internet threats that we face. And every business I walk into today is suffering from weak passwords. They're suffering from phishing attacks. They don't understand, or they're not aware of what social engineering is and how they can avoid it, spot it and avoid it. Oops, my mistake. And they're not using password managers to address the first risk, which is weak passwords. The only true solution in my mind today that I've come across for weak passwords and unique passwords across the board for all your accounts is to start using a password manager. So any security training and awareness program that you have needs to address each of these areas and others. How do you go to a safe website? And you can go on and on down the list, but you need to incorporate these common cybersecurity attack and prevention methods and train your employees on how to understand these things. The next set of slides will talk about technology protections that every business needs to have in place today to reduce the number of threats and attacks that are successful in their business. The first of which is anti-spam and anti-phishing. If we can stop a malicious email from getting into your employee's inbox, then that eliminates the risk of them accidentally clicking on it to begin with. So a good spam solution, a good solution for anti-phishing is critical to our business successes today. On top of that, we need to have an antivirus and an anti-malware so that if an attack attempts to install a virus into a system, a workstation, a mobile device, we can spot it and we can eliminate it. The unfortunate truth is, however, that antivirus is no longer enough. It's only 20 to 50% effective at low volume threats, according to Gartner from January 2015. Symantec goes even further, saying that antivirus is dead. The Symantec SVP, Senior Vice President Brian Dye, 2014 said it's dead. I think that's a little bit hyperbole. In fact, I believe what Eugene Kaspersky, who also makes an antivirus product, says about antivirus. It's like the seatbelt in your car. Your car may have an airbag and a crumple zone. My car has a heads-up display and automatic braking. But I don't stop wearing my seatbelt because I have all these other protections in place. Antivirus is just that same thing. You must be running it to stop 20 to 50% of the attacks from being successful, but unfortunately, it's not enough. So what else do we need to add? Every client of Neoscope today gets DNS protections that help identify threats and block some of them through something called DNS. What is DNS? It's the phone book of the internet. I'm not sure if people on this web conference today remember looking people's names up in a phone book. Remember that big, thick yellow phone book and the rotary dial? You would dial their phone number. Well, the internet today takes out all of the lookups that you manually had to do in the past to call somebody and automatically connects you to www.yahoo.com. The IP address behind that, you're automatically connected. So DNS is an opportunity, when you have the right tool in place, to prevent your users, your employees, from going to a malicious website accidentally or after clicking on a phishing link, because DNS is a good place to identify and block connections to those malicious websites based on the DNS vendor's heuristics and analysis of literally billions and billions of DNS requests. The most common way and example for me to explain this is you might have a website that gets 1,000 DNS requests a day, but today it has 100,000 requests. And a very quick cursory scan of that website shows that it's hosting malware and it's part of a global phishing campaign, and businesses and individual employees are clicking malicious phishing links that take them to that website, and it pushes down malware to their computer. Well, this DNS protection can identify that in near real time and block the 101,000 connection from going to it with a message that says, this website has malware, you can't go there. And through these mechanisms and early detection capabilities, they can block infections in your network. A second bit of protection that this DNS protection can provide is, let's say you have some employees that have gone off to a conference with laptops. They've joined Wi-Fi networks in the airport or in the hotel or a coffee shop, and maybe they've been infected with a botnet. Remember that bit of malware we talked about earlier? Well, when that botnet gets into your home office and it attempts to connect out to a command and control, or to your corporate office, and it connects outbound to the internet to a command and control to say, hey, I'm here, Mr. Hacker, what do you want me to do? It uses DNS, and DNS can identify that sometimes and block it. It's not a panacea, it doesn't catch everything, but it's a good additional layer in addition to antivirus to further protect your company. And all of our Neoscope clients get this, managed IT clients. It also can do content filtering, and it helps in blocking phishing attempts in some places where you would put in your credentials in a website that isn't eBay but says it's eBay. It can block some of those attacks as well. Moving on, the sixth thing that companies need to consider is mobile device management. There's more data on our mobile devices today than I had on my desktop computer a decade ago. These systems are super powerful. They have gigabits and gigabits of memory and storage, and they're running our businesses today. Many times when I'm out of the office, I can respond and action things, whether it be email or tickets or what have you, through my mobile device. We have to be able to do certain things with a mobile device today because they contain the business data. We have to be able to remotely wipe them. We have to ensure that they are locked, so if someone leaves it on a bar and someone else picks it up, it's locked and cannot be unlocked. Require strong passwords to unlock the device. And in the offices, we have to find ways to separate the mobile device on Wi-Fi from our corporate network. So creating a guest Wi-Fi network is another area of mobile device management that often gets forgotten. People just plug in, they get their Wi-Fi, they're on the internal network for guests and visiting businesses or employees. We need to separate their personal traffic on these mobile devices to a guest network. All of those are things that businesses need to consider when they do mobile device management. Laptop encryption. If you're in healthcare and you have HIPAA data, you really have gotten this message, I think, over the last few years and are beginning to encrypt your laptops. By and large, we see this. And the proof in that is by visiting the HIPAA Wall of Shame, where they publish statistics on all of the breaches that have gone on in the healthcare-related field over the last 10 to 15 years. In the last 100 breaches reported, only 9% of them were related to a laptop theft or compromise. But if you look at the entire set of data, 33% of breached healthcare records are related to laptops. What that tells you is that healthcare providers have gotten the message and they're now encrypting their data, and so fewer and fewer laptops in the healthcare arena are being stolen with unencrypted data on them. And so in your business, if you understand from a risk assessment or knowledge of your business that you have critical and sensitive data, whether it's PCI data, healthcare records, or intellectual property, and it's on a laptop, you really need to think about encrypting it. There's been stories in the news media and cybersecurity circles where if you're traveling and you enter a certain country and the country knows who you are, they do their homework, they can sometimes confiscate your laptop because they want to get that global advantage. and see what's on your laptop. Maybe they give it back, but only after they've pulled out all the data from it and understand and learn what your business is doing. Use a password manager. Password managers are a critical tool in your toolbox to addressing cybersecurity today. And we're going to dive into this a little bit because every single business I enter has this problem today. Password managers are really the only true way to make your employees, make it possible for all your different levels of employees to keep passwords unique, to make those passwords complex. I say extremely on the slide, but even just complex, and to measure their overall compliance to password security. Most password managers have a scoring mechanism that can tell you how you're doing with all your passwords that they contain. Now, why is this so important? Let me show you this next slide. This will be sobering. This is a website. It's a legitimate one. I've registered my personal email account here to be notified when a website or some entity online has been breached and my username or email address and password has been stolen by a hacker. You can see in red box that there have been almost 2 billion accounts cracked and stolen in these various different websites. Now add to that another billion, because today, if you recall or heard on the news, Yahoo came clean with another breach, not the original breach that they announced 5 or 6 months ago of 500 million accounts, but today they said, yes, we've confirmed another billion accounts were breached sometime in 2013 or 14, and they got your username and your password. So why does that matter? If you don't have a password manager, then your users are typically using 4 or 5 different unique passwords over and over again on their personal email, on their bank account, on their VPN account, and you have no way of knowing if they're reusing a password that they have on a LinkedIn account and on your VPN account. Even if it's long and complex, it still can be breached elsewhere. A password manager removes that need for end users to simplify their passwords to a single set and allows them to use unique passwords that are complex at every site. Not only that, it actually improves efficiency to the point where employees can begin to adopt multi-factor authentication on critical accounts like email accounts, public email accounts, VPN accounts, bank accounts. These are critical accounts where you need to use or begin to use multi-factor authentication. That enables you to avoid hackers breaching your password anywhere else and using it to log into your email account in particular. That's a really bad one. If somebody gets into your email account, your public Yahoo Gmail account, you are in some significant risk because you have an ability as a hacker there to reset an account anywhere else online. Where does that reset link go? It goes to your email account, your Yahoo, your Gmail account. So if I want to break into your bank, I can reset your password at the bank, I can log into your web email account, and I can see it, click the link, and get access. So it's really critical that your critical accounts, of which a web account, bank account, VPN account, implement multi-factor authentication. So what is multi-factor? What is two-factor? It's the combination of a username and a password with one other factor, something you know, something you have, or something you are. So something you have could be a passcode that rotates on your cell phone, your smartphone, and is combined with the something you know, your username and password. Or something you are could be a fingerprint reader. The iPhone uses something you are, a fingerprint, to unlock it, if you like. That is the gold standard for authenticating into critical accounts. Something that's often forgotten or not done at many of the businesses that I go into to talk to are vulnerability assessments. This is where we scan your internet-facing website, your firewall, and inside your firewall, all your devices to discover all the devices that are on the network, enumerate them with what web services, what ports they're listening on, are they all secure, are they appropriate. We scan them for things like missing patches, dangerous or poor configurations, default configurations, default usernames and passwords. And then we have to go through and help the clients remediate those. We do follow-up validation scans to remove false positives and verify that the patching and the fixes have been done. Remember Sun Tzu in The Art of War said, his generals, he tasked his generals with knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your own army before you begin a battle, and you'll be successful in battle. Not do vulnerability assessments leaves yourself open to not knowing what weaknesses you have and how you might be taken advantage of. And finally, the 10th thing that all businesses need to start thinking about as the cost of doing business is cyber liability coverage, right? This is protection for those really egregious compromises that might take your business down for a couple of days, might make it into the news. You need to do forensics. You need to hire and pay for credit monitoring of the compromised records. You may need to hire a media relations firm to help protect your reputation and restore the damage that was done to your business's reputation. All of these different things can be covered under different forms of CLIC, or cyber liability insurance coverage. And there's a few examples there, from data breach, privacy crisis, multimedia liability, extortion, network security. There are others. Talk to your insurance provider today who sells you your fire and flood and other insurances, your directors and officers, your errors and omissions, and ask about cyber liability coverage. Very good. So let's look at where we've been. The Neoscope Shield was designed, and we're going to go through this briefly before we open it to questions, to address these areas, all but the cyber insurance question. We partner with a couple of vendors on cyber insurance, and we can recommend it to our clients, but that's usually purchased directly through their existing contracts. So the Shield covers the first 9 and then some bonuses. So let's talk about that for just a moment. The Neoscope Shield starts with a risk assessment to identify and ensure that you have a clear plan on the risks that you face and how you want to spend your finite dollars and time addressing the most egregious risks. It moves on with the automated website tool to govern employees and to train your employees. Both of these are covered in a web interface that presents to your users through an email. Here is a policy you must go read and e-sign. Here is a video you must go watch and then take a questionnaire and then e-sign, so that we know you're following your governance and you've received your governance, you've read it, and you've done your training. We also deploy technology protections, as discussed: anti-spam, antivirus, DNS protections, vulnerability scanning, you name it. We've got all of those technology protections covered in the Shield. You go and talk to your cyber insurance provider, but I or my team will help you fill out the cybersecurity questionnaire that comes with cyber insurance that says, do you do training? Do you have a risk assessment? Do you do these things? We've designed it to actually fit those cyber insurance questionnaires almost perfectly. And as a bonus, we also have started adding, well, I've just mentioned this VCSO. I and my team become your security advisors as a VCSO, or virtual Chief Information Security Officer. I help you with the insurance questionnaires. I can answer security questions. I have clients come to me all the time with, hey, Craig, I'm going to do this. What should I do? What's the most secure way to do this? And I gladly respond and help advise them as though I'm on staff for them. We also have recently added phishing testing of employees, of clients. So before we even start a Shield deployment, we will phish your employees to get a baseline on how many people clicked. And then we'll go through the deployment of the Neoscope Shield and the training and the governance, and we'll retest. And then we'll retest the ones that still clicked, and we'll make sure that they finally get it, that they have to be vigilant about not clicking on malicious links that could infect and take down your entire business. We also are aware of funding that exists in the great state of New Hampshire. There is job training fund money, which is grant money available to businesses to pay, in some cases, for cyber training. We can help advise you on that if that's something you want to pursue. It does delay the deployment, and it has a risk of not being accepted because, unfortunately, we were successful 3 out of 4 times, but we were turned down once because They said that cybersecurity is the cost of doing business today. We don't want to fund this particular company for it. But there are training funds, and we've been successful at 75% of the time. Here's an example, and what you see are 3 levels of the Neoscope Shield, the basic, advanced, and enterprise. We're happy to come into your business and talk to you about these different levels. All of our clients get some flavor of the basic protection, which is DNS and the consulting, the training. All of that is included for all of our managed IT clients. But for those clients with a higher degree of sensitivity to attack or likelihood of attack or sensitive and critical data, we like to throw on the advanced and the enterprise levels of the shield for them. And as you see, we've recently added phishing testing of employees. So that is it in a nutshell. In the last 40 minutes, we've talked about protecting your business for cyber peace of mind. I'll turn it back over to Charlie to see if anyone has questions that they would like to ask.
Hello there, everyone. Looks like we covered a lot of great information today with Craig. Thank you for your time, sir. It does look like we got about 3, 4, 5 questions here. Some of them I think have been answered via the web portal here, but the first one comes from a client that asked, how long does a risk assessment take?
That's a good question, Charlie. Risk assessments are interesting because they can take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours for a relatively small client to upwards of a week, depending on how many locations, how many people, senior leadership I have to interview or my staff need to interview on various topics relating to, if you remember the risk assessment, what data they have, where does it move through the organization, what are the threats, vulnerabilities we've identified, and just to add to that a little bit, we look at 3 types of risks that businesses face: administrative, physical, and technical risks. So the administrative are like, how do you onboard and offboard an employee? The physical risks are, how do you get into your building and where are you storing your data? Is it locked up when it's sensitive and critical, or is it left out? Physical risks, that was physical. Technical risks are, have you hardened your Active Directory sufficiently to force your users to comply with your policy? Or is it left as a discretionary control? We want to see mandatory controls on your employees, mandatory 2-factor VPN authentication. So all of those things, can take between a day and 5, 6 days of on-site work, and then a whole lot of off-site work, writing it up and presenting it in that risk registry format. Good question. Thank you.
All right, we got another one here from the field that says, do you address physical security in your risk assessment?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, we do look at physical security. Per the NIST 800-R1 standard on NIST on risk frameworks, risks are categorized into 3 big buckets: physical, administrative, and technical, like I just explained. And in the physical realm, we look at things like, what is your business model? I'll tell you a little story. We were at a healthcare provider who did counseling services, and they were in the business of sometimes, rarely, but sometimes having to take children away from unfit parents. And so they had a real threat to their physical security because if you think of an unfit parent, why might they be unfit? Well, maybe, unfortunately, we have an opium epidemic. Maybe they are hooked on heroin, and when you take their kids away, they may become angry, and they may do crazy things. And so we set up and looked at physical security of the building, code words for if someone, God forbid, an active shooter entered the building, they could take shelter in place or they could evacuate the building. We looked at all sorts of things, and then they brought in a state trooper who trained them on those kinds of scenarios and what the best response was, so that they had real-world training to prevent a tragedy from being any worse than it might otherwise be. So yes, we do look at physical security risks. Thank you for asking that.
All right, and let's go through this here, because it looks like some people are asking the same kinds of questions here, so we'll try not to repeat them. Here's another one that says, have clients who've purchased the Neoscope Shield seen a reduction in security incidents in their environments?
That's a great question, Charlie. The Shield is not a panacea. It's not going to solve every problem. but I can give you anecdotal evidence. About a year and a half ago, when I came on board at Neoscope, we were experiencing, in general, 3 to 4 cybersecurity incidents a month within our client base. Those could be ransomware attacks to virus incidents, you name it. And I'm happy to report that over the course of the last year and a half, for those clients that have implemented the Shield, I think we had one ransomware event in the beginning 6 months of 2016, and knock on wood, we haven't had any in the latter half of 2016. I cannot say that the Shield will protect everyone all the time. That's not what I'm here to say. But it sure does make your company a lot harder to attack than most other companies out there. And if it's like the real world and I'm a guy wanting to break into a house, I'm not going to the one that's all lit up with guard dogs outside and locks on the windows and doors. I'm going to the one that's down the street that's a lot easier to break into. So it does help a tremendous amount for the companies that adopt it.
All right, we got one more question here, unless some more come in while I'm here answering this one here. It says, where and how can I learn more about this program and what you'd recommend for my company?
So the good news is that every time we deploy the Neoscope Shield, we have the ability to tailor it to some extent to the risks and threats that each individual company faces. That's why that risk assessment is important at the beginning, because we want to address, look, we don't deploy full disk encryption on laptops unless you have data that needs to be protected on it. We don't require two-factor authentication on VPNs if no one's using VPN. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So we only deploy and support the technologies that make sense for your business. We are pushing everyone to adopt password managers. But the reality is, it is tailored to the company in question. Am I answering your question, do you?
I think you gave us a good answer. I'm not sure if it was for that question because they just wanted to know where they could learn more about this program and what you'd recommend for them. So I think you gave a recommendation. So I'll answer the first part of that here. Again, this is Charlie Chase. I am the Business Development Manager here at Neoscope, so I'm probably the person that would field a lot of these questions before we even get somebody like our CSO involved here. So basically, you can reach out to myself or anyone here that is on the email string where you registered there. I can be reached at cchase@neoscopeit.com. Everybody here that attended today's webinar will be getting a follow-up email for us here, and we'll be sending out a link there that you folks there now can take advantage of a free 1-hour training from Craig. So if you didn't have enough in this hour here, you can get another one. How about that, everyone? So it looks like we are actually going to end a little early. That doesn't happen too often in the world, so I'm going to give you back your afternoon. Appreciate everybody's attendance. If anybody else has any other questions, concerns, or just some insight that they want to share with us, please reach out, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future. Thanks a lot.